To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does.
I am not involved in Russia. No loans, no nothing.
Congressman Adam Schiff, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Let me start with this. Given what we've learned and what you have access to, is the president telling the truth when he says that?
Well, Chris, I can only comment on what's revealed publicly, but clearly and publicly, the president was not being truthful about that. I think the significance, there are several layers of significance to these latest developments. The first is that the president had a financial interest, a potential financial interest in doing business with Russia during the course of the presidential campaign. And that financial interest may have caused the president to have a pro-Russian foreign policy during the campaign. But the second point is the one that you mentioned and you bring up, which is the president was being less than truthful about pursuing business with Russia during the campaign. This is part of a pattern we have seen not only with the president, but with his son and with others, being less than truthful when it comes to Russian ties. Of course, probably the most significant is both the president and his son dissembling about the purpose of that meeting that the son and others in the campaign had with Russian representatives, which they claimed was about adoptions when it wasn't. And finally, Chris, I would say that it's also significant that Michael Cohen should issue a statement about this today during the storm. This is an effort, I think, once again, to get this information out in a way that they can try to frame what it means or hide what it means during the storm. We, early on in this part of the public record, had requested information from Mr. Cohen. When that wasn't sufficiently forthcoming, we had to subpoena the information. And Mr. Cohen is now choosing this time to make a public statement about how he would like that information to be seen.
Are you convinced that the subject of the back and forth from Felix Sater, who's an associate of the president and has done some deals with him, who's a Russian-born ex-con, and Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney, that what they were really wanting to do was build a tower in Moscow? That was actually the object that they were engaged in.
Well, you know, just looking at the public record, if these reports are accurate, and I can't comment on any materials that we may or may not have, but if the public reports are accurate and they sought to build a tower in Russia, obviously that's a major financial undertaking that would, in which the Trump organization would derive a considerable amount of economic wealth, or would have a sufficient economic interest to make it worthwhile. That was ample reason for the president to adopt a very pro-Russian policy, particularly at that stage of the campaign when the president doesn't know whether he's going to win or lose, when he may derive benefit from whatever it does to his brand by running for president. But also, if he were to lose the election, at least he'd have the benefit of saying nice things about Russia and having a policy that might help him do business with them in the future.
I want to ask you about the timing and what you make of it. The three sort of bits of information we've gotten, which are these emails about the letter of intent and the deal and the pursuit of the deal, which is happening again during that primary period. And then, of course, that meeting in Trump Tower with Donald Jr. and Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner, with someone who says they're a Russian government agent with dirt on Hillary Clinton. All of that happens before the DNC hacks are made public. What do you make of that timing?
Well, I think it's significant that what the Russians did, particularly in that meeting with Don Jr. and Paul Manafort and others, was very much consistent with Russian tradecraft and Jared Kushner, very much consistent in the sense that the Russians use oligarchs and cutouts to give them some level of deniability. They want to test, do we have a willing recipient of information of our help? And if so, would it make sense for us to deliver negative information about Hillary Clinton? How should we do it? How much deniability do we need? What's the best timing? And, of course, they got a lot of that information at that meeting. Yes, the Trump campaign would love it. Late summer is the best timing. And, of course, that's when the emails begin to be dumped. So it's very consistent with tradecraft. But even, you know, the business deal, the potential dangling of a business deal over this Trump Tower is also consistent with what the Russians do, both in terms of legitimate transactions and illegitimate transactions as a way of exerting influence over people they think might influence U.S. policy. And who could do that more than a candidate for president?
I want to ask you on something that seems at first perhaps unrelated, which is the president's first pardon of Joe Arpaio, who's a political ally, a person the president apparently reportedly asked Jeff Sessions if the government could drop its case against. You had some reaction to that. How do you think that pardon will resonate with people currently possibly under criminal investigation in the Russian matter?
Well, you know, a couple of things. First, if the president was soliciting input from the DOJ about whether they could drop the case against Arpaio, it's, of course, very consistent with James Comey's testimony about what he tried to do with Michael Flynn. But beyond that, this pardon in the midst of the case, because, of course, the case against Arpaio wasn't over, he hadn't even been sentenced yet, sends a message which I think very likely deliberate to other people. If you have my back, if you stick with me, I will protect you. In fact, I won't even wait until criminal proceedings are over to use the pardon power. And, of course, that is very threatening, not just to our investigation, but to the whole system of checks and balances. If the President of the United States can say, basically, you can ignore the Constitution if you're on my side, and if you're doing things even that are racially profiling that I approve of, I will pardon you. That tears apart our system of checks and balances. And you know, for one thing, I know a lot of people, and the governor was suggesting that this power is more or less absolute. It's not absolute. And you cannot read this power in a way that would allow a construction as negating other parts of the Constitution, which it would if you read it as giving the president the ability to say, hey, law enforcement, you can ignore the Constitution, and if you do, I will pardon you.
That's a very interesting point from Congressman Adam Schiff. Thanks for being here tonight.